here inside the New Orleans terrorist home. You can see that it's been clearly destroyed, the door at least, from the FBI raid yesterday. But if we walk through the home, we see some signs of what he was up to. He had this work area here, lots of different chemicals splayed around, and different electronics. This is, again, a work setup. Left receipts, just very unkempt in here. If we go over here, actually, you can see the Department of Justice documents here, the search warrant, and the property that they recorded here, which seems to be a lot of chemicals. Again, just left in disarray. There's a bedroom back here, and his, what appears to be his collection of religious materials, his Qurans, an open Quran with a passage there, as well as even the Bible here, but mostly books on Islam, and his prayer rug just to the left of me here. And if we go back, there's another bedroom here. You can see he left all these belongings, contact lenses, personal belongings, his bathroom. This seems to be some sort of workspace, again, with other chemicals here. The light's still on, some kind of station set up here. We're not really sure what that was for. In, what we can assume was also a bedroom. You can see clothes left here, and just a sign that
it's a good thing we can be absolutely certain that the terrorist was acting completely alone, because it'd be a shame if she contaminated a perfectly important crime scene for any reason. But we'll come back to the lady in the yoga pants in a little bit. But first, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Rescue Michigan Sunday night live stream with our returning guests, Scott McMahan and Barry Altman. How you guys doing? You have a good Christmas? Happy New Year?
Awesome. Quiet but awesome at the same time. Yep.
It's this is normally the time that the holidays are finally over, and it's back to the daily routine. But I feel like we're also kind of in that holding period between now and Inauguration Day, 15 days to go, and just like the suspense is just building. What's going to happen? What's going to happen tomorrow? Tomorrow's the big certification day. I don't know. Now that I mentioned, I should probably try to do a live stream of that proceeding in the House. So, speaking of which, Mike Johnson is now the Speaker. So there you go. As if they were just not allowed Trump to become president if they were still sorting out the Speaker. But whatever.
It certainly would have delayed certification. And
I don't know. There's still a way. There's a Speaker pro tem. Hey, everybody. Hey, Patty. How you doing? Hey, Jonathan. Good to see you.
Hey, Patty.
Rumble, we see you there, too. So anyway, it's I don't know. I feel it's almost like it should be a slow news week on account of the legislature's out of session. But then, on one hand, there's all the inauguration stuff coming around the corner. And then also there's this sudden, bizarre stream of terrorism that just happens on January 1st. The very first day of 2025, and right out the gate, two completely unrelated acts of terrorism, except for the terrorists both being U.S. military, both going to the same military base, both using the same obscure car rental service. Two completely unrelated acts of terrorism. So I don't know. I'm sure I'm just being a paranoid conspiracy theorist here. Hey, Dwayne,
I'm finding out sometimes it looked like, man, security is weak around our leaders, bro. It is really pathetic. If you got any kind of background in security stuff and understanding about how the people who look to do bad stuff move and how they make decisions on soft targets, man, it's like we're doing really good that we haven't had that many damn attacks. I mean, it's like, man, it's pathetic when you get up close.
It's amazing how we have security. It's just every time a terrorist goes to strike, suddenly all the security is just gone. Like they have these bollards to protect New Orleans on this extremely historic and extremely busy street to be a prime target for terrorism. And just that one day when the terrorists strike, all of a sudden all the blockades just gone. It's like, it's just so crazy. The one day a lone nut shooter goes to assassinate President Trump, the Secret Service is just totally checked out and nothing's going right and the roof is unguarded, and it's just amazing, But anyway, before we get to that, I want to talk about something else that has just come up in the news today. Well, okay, so and Scott's got more of a story about this than I do, but let me set the table here. I got contacted a few weeks ago from somebody, and I want to choose my words very carefully here because I don't want people to not contact me for fear that I'm going to talk about their conversations with me on stream. But let me just say, someone reached out to me who credibly claimed that Trump was looking into appointing a guy by the name of Andrew Huff to a fairly substantial, significant government position. And this individual wanted me to encourage and get our supporters and listeners and viewers and subscribers to contact Congress and support Andrew Huff for this government position, which I'll put on the screen so you guys can see what position it is. It was the position of Deputy Secretary for Strategic Preparedness and Response, which is a department in the Department of Health and Human Services. So this would be a Senate-confirmed position, someone who would report to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, which, assuming everything goes through, would be R.F. Kennedy Jr. And this individual wanted me to encourage people to support RFK Jr., to support Tulsi Gabbard for DNI, which is not in the same department, which is kind of weird, but then also this guy. And the request is made very urgently. Please, right? And this is in the middle of lame duck. So I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, well, I like Tulsi, so I'm happy to do that. I mean, I have to kind of squeeze things in. I love Bobby Kennedy, so I'm happy to do that too. But who's Andrew Huff again? And then I Google him. I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember this guy because we were talking about him with Scott McMahan some months ago. And for those who don't remember, in fact, we should I'll turn over Scott in a second here. But Andrew Huff is the author of this book. You may have heard of it. It's the modestly titled Truth About Wuhan, How I Uncovered the Biggest Lie in History, and in which Dr. Andrew Huff pulls back the curtain on the most controversial public health crisis of our time, revealing hidden truths and challenging the narratives that have shaped our understanding of the COVID-19 pandemic, drawing on first-hand experience and meticulous research. Now, I've actually got a copy of the book, and the end notes are almost entirely like just links to articles on web pages. But anyway, this book offers a provocative exploration of the origins of the virus, the global response, and the ongoing implications for public health, national security, and society, endorsed by a diverse array of influential voices. I didn't know books were endorsed. Usually the term is blurbed, right? Usually it's like you get a blurb from somebody and there's like a comment, a quotation from them, what they liked about the book or why we should read the book and how great it is. But anyway, so these people just apparently gave him their endorsements, and there's RFK Jr. there, Drew Pinsky, Alex Jones, always a reliable source of information, rigorous to the T. Dr. Robert Malone, co-inventor of the mRNA vaccine technology. And I will say, Dr. Malone, certainly can't take away from the fact that he is a distinguished expert in medicines. However, I would also say he's kind of been a bit unhinged on the social media and the Substack for the last couple of years. And we're all people and emotions get the better of us, but there might be a reason why he's not one of the multiple people that Trump has been naming for his administration as with who am I thinking of? Scott, you know who I'm talking about.
Peter McCullough.
Huh? Peter
McCullough.
Yes, exactly. Peter McCullough, right. And then Steve Bannon, a go-to medical expert to authenticate the veracity of the book. Anyway, before I continue with talking about Andrew Huff, Scott, why don't you tell us what you know about Andrew? Because here's the funny thing about Andrew Huff. he's not just an expert in the origins of COVID. He's also been involved in Michigan Republican politics for the last couple of years, strangely. So, Scott, why don't you set the table for us a little more here?
Yeah. So I met Andrew because he started speaking out against Christina Caramo and Robert Owens and Tom Renz and Mike Flynn over a year ago. And he first started back in, I think it was November is when he started speaking out on X about them. And so I went back, I read all of his old tweets, and hey Heather, and I had him on my show. Like, he was like my second or third guest when I started my show back in, I think it was in March. And I mean, I've read his book, and he claims that he was employed by the Eco Health Alliance, which was kind of at the center of the controversy with the origin of the virus and the vaccine, or the virus, actually, because they were writing grant proposals to the CDC to do gain of function research in Wuhan at the Wuhan lab. And so he worked there until, I believe it was 2016. And then he got documentation when he says that he stopped working there. His conscience wouldn't allow him to work there any longer once he found out that they were basically laundering money from the United States taxpayer to this Wuhan lab for gain of function research. And so he claims that he got documentation of that, and then he quit. And he just held on to his documentation, though. He didn't bring it public. He just held on to it until he felt that the time was right, which was in late 2020 or into 21, I think, is when he actually whistle blew on it and came public with it. And but he did prepare himself. He was living in Silicon Valley, had a job in Silicon Valley in 2019, and he says that he was watching the satellite mapping or whatever, and he's seeing clouds of that he thought was incinerators back in September of 2019, and so he thought that there was he was looking for signs that the pandemic was starting. Although he didn't whistleblow, he didn't tell anybody else about this. He just had this knowledge for himself. Sold everything in Silicon Valley, bought a couple hundred acres in the UP. And he said he moved in on March 4th, right before he was all settled with his multiple months worth of emergency food and all of his guns and everything, just in time for the start of the 2 weeks to slow the spread. So that's kind of his story. And then once he started whistleblowing, then he claims that the U.S. government started coming after him. He told me that he thought that the U.S. government spent about $50 million persecuting him. He claims that an 8-foot military drone crashed into his house. He claimed to have had a shootout with two FBI or DIA people. He said he didn't know which, on his property. He claimed that he called 911 twice during that shootout, but they didn't respond. That so many claims, but he couldn't actually. I mean, there's no proof of any of it. And they're just he couldn't provide me with any real documentation. Now, I've since talked to several other journalists.
Hey, Scott, if you don't mind, I didn't mean to interject, but I realized I failed to set the table fully myself because I forgot to mention. The reason why I bring this up now is because this was the top story on Breitbart this morning. And you can see by the nearly 6,000 comments it's gotten that just the fact that this was the top story on Breitbart is Andrew Huff's interview with the Breitbart people suggests that there is indeed motion happening for this guy to get this appointment. So I just want to bring that to just to get out there that this is why we're talking about this, because this makes it seem much, much more likely than I thought a few weeks ago that this is something that's really happening. So yeah. I'm sorry, Scott, please continue.
Yeah. So I DM'd with Jordan Schachtel, who has written a few pieces about Andrew Huff. He said that he's a pretty big journalist. I mean, he's a pro. He's been doing this for a long time. He's got a large following. He says that he's been warning everybody that would listen to him about Andrew Huff that he believes that he's a sociopath. And there are some serious issues. I mean, I actually think that he's pretty dangerous, and he so he came out. He at the time that he started talking about everything that was happening, he started whistleblowing. He got sucked into the health and freedom movement, and that's how he met RFK Jr. And it's also how he met the Flynns, because Flynn got involved with the health and freedom movement, just like he does with every other cause that's important to the right. And RFK was obviously in that. And he told me that RFK Jr. at that time, he told me privately, and he said this in X post too, that he thought that RFK Jr. and Flynn were behind the government persecution. He has made the claims that he's made are just unbelievable. I mean, he has, and even against his own wife, he claimed to me that the government had given his wife $6 million to spy on him, and that she kept in a separate account that he didn't have access to. He sent me documents that he said that he sent to the judge that included nude pictures of his wife, proving that she is having an affair. And I deleted that because I didn't want to have it on my computer. I'm like, what are you sending me? So when this started coming out that there might be something happening with Andrew Huff, suddenly several other I said something on X about it, and then I was instantly contacted by several other journalists, and I sent you a link to one of them in the private.
Yeah, I'll pull it up right now,
and it's worth reading. And I'd already had a relationship with Jonas. I've talked to him several times. He's been an investigative journalist for 25 years, and this one's not long. So if you don't mind,
sure. Yeah.
That kind of sets the table. It confirms what I have, and then I've got my whole text history with him, and there's some really shocking statements that he's made to me in these text messages. I really do not believe that Andrew Huff should be anywhere near Trump, anywhere near the White House. And I'm not saying that he's physically dangerous like he would, but I do not believe that he is psychologically stable.
Yeah, I'll play you guys a short clip here. This is part of a longer interview. You should watch the whole thing, but this is an interview that Andrew Huff gave to Drew Pinsky, who apparently endorsed his book. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. I mean, it's an hour and 20-minute interview, but there's a certain vibe you get from him. And I'll just play this short clip, and I'll show what I mean. Here we go.
I don't know who's after the whistleblowing that I've done. I've been told that I'm feared by everyone in Congress. I've actually, one of my whistleblower complaints, I heard the U.S. Senate had to call emergency meetings when I first submitted them to the Senate to figure out how they're going to deal with that.
All right, let me just stop it right there. I'm feared by everyone in Congress. Now, I will tell you, folks, first off, there's two sides to Congress, so most people aren't feared by both. They'd be feared by one or the other, maybe, if at all. But congressmen in general are not very afraid of ordinary people, and not even whistleblowers, to tell you the truth. So that's kind of a grandiose claim right there. I'm feared by members of Congress. They held hearings just to know how to deal with me. And you might think this guy is a little bit of a me monster. And indeed, this is his website. This is Andrew Huff, andrewhuff.com. There's his website. There is a photo of him and his family and his boy, and he is at our service. He is an expert witness. So, and for those who, I think everybody knows expert witnesses charge a lot of money, and it's good work if you can get it. And so he's soliciting his high-priced services for you there. He's also an inspiring educator, a dynamic speaker. You can see all these amazing topics he will educate you on, everything from, let's see, leading technology businesses, technology forecasting, tactical negotiations. This is just, this guy knows everything. Enterprise risk analysis, future technology strategy. These are all courses he's written, apparently. Biostatistics. And this goes on and on and on forever. He also is, I think he's kind of a life coach too. Let me see if that's on here someplace. He's got this very, very, very modest bio here. He's got books. He's got the book we just looked at. He's also got this other book in progress, Killing Our Future. Okay, it's not a book yet. It's a book. It's a book that will be a book someday, in which he will expose the hidden corruption within America's public education system, because that is something he's an expert on. Also, another book in progress after he finishes that first one. He'll work on this one too, called In Progress, 9 or 11 Rules for National Security. He's also a national security expert. So contact him and book him. He's also got a Substack. Actually, he doesn't have a Substack. But he's got lots of services he can offer to you. He's he's speaking engagement. He's meticulously crafted to challenge conventional thinking, inspire audiences, blending rigorous analysis with real experience, and a touch of wit. Whether addressing executive teams, academic audience, and your industry conferences, I deliver impactful narratives that ignite dialogue, foster innovation, and motivate action. Now, this is all great and wonderful. Also, kind of out of character for a whistleblower, though, wouldn't you say? I mean, usually these are like two different kind of people, right? You got professionals, doctors who have a certain way of speaking, a very sciencey, technical, rigorous way of speaking, and then there's you got your life coach types, who'll tell you how you can be a better you. I don't know. There's something about this guy just kind of rubs me the wrong way. But anyway, so Scott, you were saying there's this Vesterberg.
Yeah, let me read you this. This is by Jonas Vesterberg, and it's a fairly short piece. So let me just read it. He says, Andrew Huff, fraud or nut job, maybe both. So so-called COVID whistleblower Andrew Huff, who is slated for an undersecretary role in the incoming Trump administration, is not a stable or credible person I've been forced to find out the hard way. Huff contacted me a few months ago claiming to need help with finding work. Perhaps I had some contacts that could help. I smelled a feeble social engineering attempt, or maybe some poking around, likely connected to one of Huff's associates in the pandemic narrative grid. But I was a bit curious. I wanted to see where he planned to take it. I sent Huff's CV to Dr. Martin Samuelson, VP of Clinical Research at Alligator Biosciences. Martin is a good friend of more than 3 decades. A few days later, he warned me that Huff's resume seemed synthetic, bloated, and largely unverifiable. Clear red flags, Dr. Samuelson stated. When Huff found out that I didn't have any leads for him, he threw a temper tantrum over text messages and displayed typical pathological narcissistic behavior, accusing the one who had tried to help him, and bizarrely suggested that I somehow owed it to him to get me my money, Swede, because Jonas is Swedish. Then he decided to further boost the lunacy and went on a more sinister rampage. He doxed me on X and accused me of being a Swedish spy, tagging the entire incoming Trump administration in the bizarre hopes of creating a threat vector against me. I decided to try to softly convince him that a retraction and apology would be in his best interest. So I pleaded with him for a few weeks later to take his outrageous post down. Now, from a new phone number, I was forced to procure because he had doxed his phone number.
Love it.
Huff, at least now responding to my messages, said that he would consider posting a retraction, provided that I signed a document swearing to not having spied on him. During that same interaction, Huff also made a highly nefarious proposal. He wanted to recruit me to run an intelligence operation against his estranged wife. So here's something else that I can break right now, is that I have a text message from Jonas. He didn't know who Melinda Pego was, but Andrew also asked Jonas to do a deep dive background check on Melinda Pego, said that he believed that she was a spy. And so he told me in one text message that he was going to try to take down the Republican Party. He said that he was working with the Democrats to try against the Republicans because the Republicans weren't going to help him. And in all of this, I just tried to be, kind of friendly and helpful. I never got involved. I always kind of kept him at arm's length. And then at the end, and this was let me find the message here. because I think it's important for the story. Okay, so he said he claimed that Bergman and Ron Johnson and the Michigan State Police was working with the DIA and the FBI against him, and so that's Senator Ron Johnson, and then he talked about how Tom Renz and Flynn had connected him, or Tom Renz had connected him with Robert Owens, and Robert Owens and Christina Caramo came up to his house and spent a weekend there at his house in the UP, and they asked him for, I think it was $20,000, and they said that if he gave him $20,000, they would help him with a run for Congress. And
cool.
that was right before the Mackinac conference, and so that was kind of, for me, that was just one little early connection between Flynn and Tom, and Robert Owens and this the Christina Caramo thing. But it's just so many different things. And then all of a sudden he called me in August and he said he was working with Patrick Burns and Tom Renz and Laura Logan, and he was working with Flynn because by working with Flynn he was going to be able to get an appointment in Trump's administration through RFK.
Someone's complaining about the background noise. I think it might just be someone set up, but Barry, can you just mute yourself for a moment just so you can see if that's what's doing it? There's a mute button at the bottom left. Oh, that did it. Okay, yeah, Barry, when you want to speak, just unmute yourself then.
All right.
So thank you. All right, I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead. And Barry, if you just mute yourself whenever until you want to speak.
Okay.
Barry.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Whenever you need to speak, and we'll be fine.
Gotcha. Dog, it just unmuted it, so.
There you go.
Okay. So, okay. So then he sends me this message, and he says that he was working with Flynn again, and then he's not working with them again, and then he's working with them again. Like, it was just back and forth. I'm like, I can't even keep up. I don't even know what you're trying to do. He was trying to get me to write a story saying that that there was machine fraud. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. You're not going to tell me what to write about. And and at that time I was full on promoting early voting, and I said, if they're really wanting to help Trump win, then get me on Laura Logan's show or Tom Renz's show, and we can talk about early voting. That'll prove that they're trying to help Trump win. And of course they didn't want to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they want to do the opposite of that for some strange, inexplicable reason.
Right. Okay, so then out of the blue, he says that he's talking to some high-profile attorneys.
You're reading text from him on your phone right now.
What's that?
You're reading text from him on your phone right now?
Yeah, he says, I talked to all the high-profile attorneys, but none will sue the party, because he wants to sue the party, the Michigan Republican Party.
Well, that'll be helpful.
So he says, so I will go make a deal with the Dems on my cases. I agree with them more than the left. I'm not sure what he means by that. Who he agrees with more than
he
the
probably
left.
misspoke or mistyped, and that was thinking he probably meant to say I agree with them more than the Republicans or something.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's clear that he's not thinking clearly. He says diplomacy is all about carrots and sticks. And then a week and a half, 2 weeks later, just out of the blue, completely unprovoked, I hadn't have any communication. I never talked about him, nothing. He texts me out of the blue. He says, I am about to F you stupid clowns worse than you have ever been F'd in your lives. And then he blocks my text, blocks my phone, blocks me on X. And that's it. I haven't heard anything from him since then. That was in October.
Profound. Sounds like an outstanding diplomat. Perfect shooting for the role of.
Yeah.
Is it any reason we listen? Is it any reason this guy's getting any airplay at all?
Well, I think he is someone who has been narrative crafting himself as, a celebrity COVID whistleblower and as an expert. He's credentialed. He's a PhD. He worked at EcoHealth. So I guess being a whistleblower also makes you a great manager. I don't know. But he's also a life coach. In fact, if you really do watch this interview with Dr. Drew, which you can just find by Googling, the ego is just off the charts. I mean, he comes across as a bullshit artist in the video, like in the interview. It's not hard to see at all. But yeah, I mean, we're sounding the alarm, guys, because this is not the role you want a crazy person to serve in. This is the part of Health and Human Services that's responsible for reactions to medical public health emergencies. And I mean, certainly we don't want a Dr. Fauci type in here, but we also don't want a paranoid guy with delusions of, being the greatest whistleblower in the history of mankind. And also, everything that Scott just described. It's
mind-blowing. It is so crazy. And it's not me. Like, I thought it was just me. I'm like, I don't know if this. No, every other journalist that I've talked to about him, and I've had journalists like Jordan Schachtel reached out to me when he saw my post. He reached out to me and said, and he's got a really big account. And he said, Andrew Huff is crazy. And I've been trying to warn everybody I can about him.
Yeah. And yet again, this was the top story on Breitbart this morning. Like, that's why we're talking about this today, is because this is, if anything is a sign that there is something in motion to get him to get him confirmed, it's this. And man, we've done a few streams in the past few weeks on Trump's cabinet picks, some outstanding and wonderful, some less so, but this one would be a nightmare. And the fact that you've got a firsthand knowledge about this, I mean, I hope people watching, if anyone out there has got contacts to be able to help sound the alarm about this guy, please do, because we do want to have MAGA people in Trump's cabinet, but there might be better choices than this particular individual. I'm guessing, just guessing. So
I guess.
Hey, Adam, did you submit your name?
I'm not a doctor. No, I did not submit my name to the Trump administration. I'm good right where I am. I don't do things like run for state chair, I mean, because that's not my bailiwick. Patty says Trudeau is resigning as early as tomorrow. That'll be interesting to see. Maybe we should do a stream tomorrow. Someone asked about doing a stream for the coverage of the certification, and that might be interesting. I'm thinking about it, but we'll see. Anyway, was there anything else you want to talk about with this guy before we move on? I think that might be all we've got.
I think
it should be enough. If you're getting it to get a job in the Trump administration, your background ought to be squeaky clean, I would think. Although, Mark Ashley Price asks, how do I feel about Linda McMahan for Secretary of Education? I ask because I personally like her. Well, I think it depends. I think my hope is that her mission will be to shut down the department. So we'll see if she does that. I have to say, honestly, I mean, I'm no fan of the DeVos family, but Betsy DeVos was quite good, honestly, in terms of a lot of the Title IX stuff. She was fine as Secretary of Education, except for the fact that she allowed the institution to continue. So we'll see. I hope
she wasn't given the mandate to stop. At the national convention, there was a lot of talk about that. Vivek came to the Michigan to have breakfast with us at the Michigan hotel. And one morning, and he actually mentioned that was a priority, was to get rid of the Department of Education. So, I talked to some people from the Washington D.C. delegation that would actually, these were people that are consultants that would actually help with that kind of a thing, that consult with government agencies that are trying to scale down and get rid of employees, and they believed that was a realistic target, the Department of Education. Still wouldn't be easy, but
I've always been well. The DeVosses tried to help Detroit out back in the early 2000s, like 2001. They offered $200 million to build some schools that wouldn't be unionized, and Detroit flat out turned the money down. I just couldn't believe it. Turned down $200 million for new schools, and I mean, I know it doesn't sound like a whole lot in 2025, but man, back in 2001, that was quite a grip, and I was dumbfounded, you know, how the city even found the breath to justify turning down that money because the teachers' unions fought it.
Yeah.
Teachers' unions had that much power in Detroit that we were willing to turn down school choice and a
They
$200 million.
hate school choice, and charter schools are their kryptonite because that's a big source of one of the major sources of Democrat Party funding is teachers' unions. I mean, unions in general, but teachers' unions too. The whole education industry, which is extremely expensive. I mean, if you read John Taylor Gatto has a whole history about why bad schools cost so much, and the cost of teaching kids is unbelievably expensive, and that's because it's a special interest, and because, you know, once you get that taxpayer money, it's like any bureaucracy, just wants to grow and grow and grow. And it's real easy to use kids as your weapon to demand more money, because who wants to not give money for kids, you know? And so therefore there's never, ever, ever enough, and it just keeps on growing forever. Anyway, so
Barry, what you're talking about there, I think, you know, with the power of those teachers unions, it's the same way in Washington, D.C. with the federal employees unions. Is what I've been told, that they have tremendous amount of power in DC, and they make it very, very difficult. It's not just, you know, there's all kinds of, you know, laws and statutes that make it hard to fire federal employees, but the unions really have a lot of power and influence as well. So,
yeah. All right. So now moving on, because it's already more than a half hour in here, and something else we want to talk about, kind of a big thing, this these terror attacks. But first, I want to set the table a little bit with this story. This is kind of a revelation that just kind of quietly slipped out in the media today. Biden just kind of casually talked about maybe starting a war in the last days of his administration, and then handing that off to Trump, which would be completely. And so the story originally is Biden discussed plans to strike nuclear sites in the event Tehran moves closer to building a nuclear bomb, which means whenever we say, basically, which I mean in the next 2 weeks. This just happened like a week ago. And they talked about maybe starting a war, bombing Iran before. I mean, to think about this is completely unprecedented in American history for a president, an outgoing president, who lost his election. Well, I guess I'd say whose party lost the election, because he couldn't even run for re-election because his approval ratings was so bad, starting a war days before leaving office. And the reason I bring this up, because we're about to start talking about these terror attacks. And, you know, I mean, one possibility is that these are just some random lone nuts. We'll look at that likelihood in a moment here. But, you know, for us conservatives, I think probably everyone in the audience here is very, very excited about January 20th and what the new Trump administration is going to do. And of course, you know, friends of the show know that I tend to take a more cautious approach on things. I'm a little more cynical, but, you know, I'm certainly hopeful. For Democrats and certain other entities out there, this is the reckoning day for them, the day that they fear, the day that they are scared to death is coming. And they're looking at possible investigations into them. They're looking at not just losing political power. They're looking at investigations. Some people are looking at literal death, and I'm talking about Ukraine. We'll come back to them in a while. But the point being, there are some desperate people out there, and some of them are people with real power in the world. So we might choose to believe that, you know, these guys are lone nuts. But let's I guess we'll start with New Orleans. The story of I have to have this guy's name on the screen. Shamsu Dim Jabbar, the ISIS terrorist who apparently, you know, even though he's got a bomb-making facility in his home, the FBI has no problem at all allowing a reporter just walking in there and traipse around and contaminate a crime scene. So that reporter, by the way, she actually herself, I think, kind of realized how crazy this whole thing was. And so she actually retweeted this comment from someone else in television. This looks like to be after this video was taken. And this woman says, an FBI spokesperson tells me, I can confirm FBI Houston is currently at the North Harris County location conducting law enforcement activity. No acknowledgement or answers as to why this wasn't treated as a secure crime scene all day yesterday, leaving people to roam free with no potential evidence left behind. Yeah, it is a little weird, isn't it? In fact, the FBI themselves have this explanation for it. ERT, which I assume stands for Emergency Response Team, completed its thorough, hours-long search of the suspect's house on January 2nd, secured it, and released the property to the owner that morning. On January 3rd, we returned only to seize a vehicle near the residence in furtherance of the ongoing investigation. Oh, that's it. You see that, guys? You see? They spent hours at this house. Hours. And, you know, they left some bomb-making stuff behind for the reporter to check out, but, you know. And I was watching Scott Ritter on, he was doing an interview the other day on a show kind of like ours. Scott Ritter, besides being a Marine Corps intelligence officer, also is a firefighter. He was talking about how he has more than once in his career had to put out fires in places where there were explosives. He says, well, there's a few things here. Firstly, he tells us one story about how there's this, this guy was making some kind of explosives, and then his stupid little brother got into it. Anyway, things started exploding, and the house caught fire, and they come out. And they go in to try to save the kid, and then, like, more explosives start going off, and the fire chief is like, get out of there right now. Like, that's the first thing is fire safety. Then he's talking about this other story. He says, even aside from the preservation of evidence issues, the first priority above preserving evidence is no boom. When there's a bomb-making facility in the house, you don't just, we just told them. What was it? What they say we do? We just went in there for a couple hours and poked around for a few hours, grabbed what you needed to do, and got out of there. That was all it took. No, you don't put your men in danger. You send in the bomb squad first, and you take everything that could possibly be a danger out of there. So if some stupid reporter walks in, she doesn't blow herself up.
Exactly.
So
it's almost like the FBI wants to give more cause for its own destruction. It's like, it's almost like they want to give the American public just more desire to bring it down to its bare essentials.
Yeah,
I know everybody's probably got like a security story, man, but the closer I get into the big people who are running in politics, man, like I said a little bit earlier, it's unbelievable, the security labs. Trump getting shot at, that seems totally plausible now that I have been up close and personal with some of these security details. When Trump came on October 18th to Detroit, to Hamtramck, I spent a whole week in that office with Secret Service before he arrived.
Yeah.
But before that, and then immediately after, man, that building really had some, somebody could have did some stuff in that building. And it seemed like nobody gave a shit that it was, vulnerable, a soft target, like open all the time, no locks on some of the doors. And it was unbelievable, man. You couldn't get anybody to pay any attention. I had to just be proactive and go buy a lock and then actually screw in a bar so that one of those big sliding doors wouldn't open. And I mean, it's right there in Hamtramck, right on Joe's Campo. I just couldn't believe that people would just leave that office. And I'm the only one going in there every day in the morning. Like anybody could just be in there waiting on me or plotting on something in there to put something in there just to make headlines. You know, we were always getting vandalized. You know, people are always coming up there throwing stuff. And like I said, it was just unbelievable that we would just leave it just so vulnerable to attack like that. Like, man.
Wow. Well, on that note, to Scott's point too about it seems like the FBI is trying to get the government to dismantle them. This is Andrew Branca, who is a self-defense attorney. I'm almost just going to play this clip for the humor of it, but he's talking about the FBI's news conference when the FBI, I forget what the term is. He'll mention it in a second here. When the first thing she says is contradicting the mayor, who immediately called it a terror attack, that this is not a terror attack. So this is Branca's take on it, which is very funny and as well.
Worthy that the very presence of the FBI at this press conference and the fact that the FBI was taking over the investigation effectively requires that this was a terrorist attack. Otherwise, this would just be a local crime event over which the FBI had no jurisdiction. If there were still any ambiguity on the question of terrorism, Jabbar had attached an ISIS flag to the rear of the pickup truck he drove into the New Year's Eve crowd, and that...
Hold on, we're going to come back to this in a moment. So just look at this flag for a second here, and notice what you see on the lower half portion of the flag there. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Crowd, and that flag had been photographed by investigators.
Now, there's the flag on the side about there. You see the flag pole there? The guy taking the photo of it from that direction, looking up at the flag, kind of. We'll come back to that in a second, too.
At the scene. Nevertheless, following Major Contrell's characterization of the attack as an act of terrorism, ASAC Duncan immediately contradicted this position, stating that this was not a terrorist attack.
Good morning. My name is Alethea Duncan. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for FBI New Orleans. As Chief Kirkpatrick said, we'll be taking over the investigative lead for this event. This is not a terrorist event.
But then ASAC Duncan immediately proceeded to describe the terroristic-style IEDs that were found associated with the attack. Incidentally, before I play this clip, I feel obliged to note that I don't know just exactly what is wrong with the Federal Bureau of Investigation today. Perhaps it's simply awash in diversity, equity, and inclusion mandates to the exclusion of professionalism. But the agency doesn't do itself any favors when it sends this ASAC forward to speak on its behalf following this horrific New Orleans attack, while she's wearing a nose piercing and appears unable to grammatically speak what I presume is her native language of English.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found.
What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found? Seriously? I would note, folks, that I've lectured at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, and I've toured the facility on numerous occasions. The Academy has actual studios set up to replicate these public speaking scenarios in order to train their special agents to perform in a polished and professional manner. Undoubtedly, ASAC Duncan has received this training, and yet this is the best she can do? Perhaps incoming FBI Director Kash Patel will have something to say about ASAC Duncan's grotesquely unprofessional manner as he moves to straighten the FBI ship from its current errant course. I simply refuse to believe that the FBI cannot find an African-American female special agent, if they feel they need that particular mix of demographics for some bizarre reason, who can present herself to the public in a professional manner. And if they really can't, somebody in authority needs to be asking why not.
So that was Andrew Branca savaging the FBI right there. Yeah. So I did see some people complaining about the woke right whining about the nose piercing and all that. But I think there's a point to that. Yeah, professionalism does matter. And this woman, here's the funny thing. So later that same the other part of that story, the big part of that story is that she says this was not a terrorist attack, which was right after the mayor just said it was. And as the attorney Andrew Branca just pointed out, also the FBI's being there means it's a terror attack. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to be there. But later that same day, in a different news conference, she says it was a terror attack. So there's actually also the possibility that she really just misspoke that too, which is kind of a big thing to misspeak. Yeah, this is not a terror attack. This is a terror attack. It's kind of an important thing. Like, you might stop and correct yourself. Actually, this is a terror attack. This is a terror attack, ladies and gentlemen, given that that ISIS flag that we saw. However, here's the thing, folks. This is the that's not it. Let me say goodbye to Andrew Branca there. By the way, folks, if you own a gun, you carry a gun, you got to check out Andrew Branca's YouTube channel. Make sure you know the law of self-defense. It's fantastic. Anyway, this is what I meant to show you. This is the ISIS flag, and what's notable is that writing is on the top of the flag there, which kind of means that flag that the ISIS terrorist was flying from his truck was upside down. Oops. These ISIS terrorists, man, it's so strange. Like, so I've been told, and admittedly not an expert on ISIS, but the rule at ISIS is if you commit a terror attack and you send them a video, they have like a fealty pledge or prayer or something or other. If you send them a video or post a video of you saying the pledge, and then you do a terror attack, they will claim responsibility. They'll say, "Oh, this is then what's one of us that makes it our." ISIS did not claim responsibility for this. So there again, something's not right. Also, did you notice, and I'm not going to go back to the cold open clip, but when the one was walking through the house, the terrorist prayer rug was all black. Like, again, I'm not saying I'm an expert in Islam, but has anyone ever heard of an all black prayer rug? I don't know. I could be talking my ass here, but some people have said that's not really ordinary in Islam. But I don't know. If I'm wrong, folks in the comments, feel free to correct me. But that does seem a little out of character.
Think he was a poser, Adam?
Yeah, it just seems a little bit off, you know. Like, it just seems a little too perfect. You know, the woman, she's like, here's the bomb making stuff, and then the camera turns and pans, and there's the keffiyeh hanging from the closet shelf right there. And do you notice also the Qurans? And on the bookshelf, there's like 5 identical copies of the Quran. Like, here's those extra Qurans laying around to hand out to his friends or something. It just seemed a little strange. Seemed a little out of character. I don't know. Apparently, he had people that vouch for his Islamic radicalization, but yeah, I don't just some of these things just seem kind of bizarre and strange. You know,
I spend more time than I should on X watching the Flynn podcaster network and all the Flynn personalities, and when they all come out with a synchronized and uniform message and narrative, then that's just to me, that's an instant red flag. There's something going on here. And they did that with this is terrorist, this is a terrorist act. They showed that picture of the flag and said, did the FBI hide the flag? Did they tie it, put a tie a zip tie or something on it to hide the flag? And there were a lot of different narratives around that, trying to suggest that this was a Islamic motivated attack. But I think some of the things that you shared even more so, but my gut from the beginning was that this actually was kind of a fake. I mean, it was a terrorist act, clearly, but I don't think that it was ISIS motivated or Islamic motivated. There's another group, when you were mentioning the groups that for whom Trump's inauguration is an existential threat, the biggest one is the military industrial complex.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah, remember he did the last U.S. president to be assassinated was murdered by the CIA.
Right. Exactly.
Just saying. So,
and that's kind of what I've been arguing now for the last 6 months, is that our own intelligence apparatus is engaged in psychological warfare against Americans, and on the right and on the left, and that they're using the Flynn network and other similar things to put out narratives that are meant to deceive us and mislead us and ultimately lead us into some sort of civil war. And so, they're really stoking anti-Semitism. They're really, they're doing it on all different fronts, and it's sick. It's really sick.
Yeah, we'll come back to this thought in a moment, but let's look at the other terror attack now too, because there was this one in which this lone nut Islamic ISIS guy, whose story doesn't quite add up, who also, by the way, it's weird because he killed people with his truck. He ran them down. Then he jumped out of it and started shooting people. And then the cops put him down. And none of his explosive stuff ever went off. In Vegas, the story was completely different. Here we have an American Special Forces non-commissioned officer who is an absolute expert in explosives, who chooses the one vehicle that would be the worst to use in a bombing, the Tesla Cybertruck, which diverts the blast up and away from the building such that, thankfully, nobody was killed except for himself, although he was actually also shot to death by a 50 caliber Desert Eagle before he was blown up, which is also a very weird story. So let's talk a little bit about this guy. I forget his first name, Livelsberger, who also, by the way, this is where just you gotta stand back in awe at the things that the government expects us to believe, or the media, I guess I should say, that the guy was, you guessed it, a big Trump supporter. Yes, the incredibly symbolic act of renting a Tesla truck and blowing up a Tesla truck in front of a Trump hotel in Las Vegas. That was the actions of a hardcore Trump supporter, ladies and gentlemen. Just like that first Trump assassin who loved Trump so much that he decided to try to murder him and ended up just, murdering an innocent firefighter. Yes, that's the Daily Beast for you right there, folks.
The FBI released, right after the Sean Ryan thing, within, I think it was the next morning, the FBI released 2 messages that they claimed they retrieved from his cell phone in his Cybertruck, that proved that he was a Trump supporter.
Oh yeah.
And then it was like a Word document. I mean, there's no way to authenticate it or verify it whatsoever.
Yeah. They also claimed his body was burned beyond recognition, but thankfully, his ID was found right there unscathed in the vehicle. Just like, do you guys remember this? One of the most amazing coincidences, I guess, in modern history was when terrorists attacked the World Trade Centers, murdered thousands of Americans, and reduced these giant skyscrapers, hundreds of tons of metal and concrete, and into this giant pile of rubble and molten steel that burned for weeks. And then the terrorist passport was just found laying on the ground untouched. It just from the airplane to the fireball, the explosion, the collapse, and trucks hauling away thousands of tons of rubble, and just there's a passport just laying right there on the ground. Amazing. And it happens again. The stories. I forgot I was going to tell this one when we were looking at the first guy. Gerald Salenti had said, talking about that video the reporter took, the only thing that would have made it better is if she found a Syrian prisoner in the back room. These people. So this guy's story, this is Matthew Livelsberger. I'll put him up on the screen here. This is Matthew Livelsberger with an interesting T-shirt there. He's got on got the Ukrainian. It's the Ukrainian trident, although it's a red on black design, which is more in common with what the Ukrainian Nazis like to wear. The Wolf's Angel and all that. They like the red and black stuff, not the blue and yellow stuff, but still Ukrainian. It's weird. This guy actually was, he was a special forces officer, so very highly trained and explosive. The kind of guy that if you'd want to kill a lot of people would know how to do it. So this is a comment from Armchair Warlord, who is, by the way, he is a military person. I think a major was his rank when he retired. He makes this point here. We have a senior special forces non-commissioned officer in Europe, exactly the kind of person who would be doing runs in Ukraine and making extensive contact with the GR and SBU. That's the Ukrainian Intelligence and Security Services. Go on leave in the U.S. and die in an apparent terror attack at the Trump Hotel. Was he being directed from Ukraine? That's an interesting question. Here's the thinking. One, it would be naive in the extreme to think that the GUR does not run a Western-facing collection and attack network, or that they refrain from targeting Western advisors for subversion. Speaking of them, by the way, you remember a few months ago, there was this terrible terrorist attack at a building in Russia called Crocus City Hall, which is actually not a city hall, it's a concert hall. It was carried out by, you'll never guess, ISIS, an old rent a jihadi, which is, of course, what ISIS is, by the way. If those don't know, ISIS is just they're just jihadis for hire. And so these were these terrorists actually got caught. It turned out they were from Turkmenistan, I think, or Tajikistan or something. And they're just paid to carry out the assassination from Ukrainian people. Anyway, it was the same kind of story, though. It was an explosive device, and it was carried out by ISIS, but it was actually carried out by Ukraine. So they make some other points here. Blackmail can make people do insane things, and senior NCOs are incredibly invested in their career to the point that the single highest risk military demographic for suicide after losing status due to misconduct. The level of compromise the Ukrainian authorities could generate on an unwary advisor is mind-boggling. Involvement in war crimes, torture, enforced disappearances, human trafficking, extreme corruption, hard black Nazism, etc. 4, the Ukrainian leadership has good reason to hate. This is the motive. They have good reason to hate and fear Trump, given their involvement in his previous impeachment. Remember that? The first thing he was impeached over? His ambitions to end the war, even at their expense. And the obvious Ukraine nexus corruption involving the present administration. Oh, yeah, that's right. There was a tie between Biden and Ukraine. What was that? Oh, that's right. His son was involved in corruption through Burisma. So Ukrainians had compromise on the Biden family, who could keep them in the fight. And now Biden's gone. Now what are they going to do? They're losing the ground war. By the way, speaking of that, here's an amazing story that came out the other day. This is from The Hill. Hold Ukraine accountable for corruption and misspent aid, says James Durso, opinion contributor. James Durso, who is a someone that is, fairly well respected in Washington, D.C. Here is what and there's a lot to this article, but here's the important thing. There's this little gem he drops right here. Maybe I should zoom in on this so you guys can see it better. In April of 2024, the leadership of Ukraine's military intelligence participated in a series of roundtable discussions at Washington think tanks and policymakers. So congressional staff was briefed on this. A former American diplomat, this is talking about Kirill Budanov, the head of Ukraine's intelligence. This guy, Kirill Budanov, is a real cloak and dagger guy. Like, loves the assassinations of Daria Dugin and these other people. That's like his bailiwick, is these bombings and stuff. Lots of funny articles about this guy. There's a Western media article glowing about him. He likes to keep his office dark. He's like literally a Bond villain caricature type of guy. Anyway, a former American diplomat familiar with the visit told this author, quote, they expressed their reservations about continuing full-scale conventional warfare. They were concerned that Ukraine had lost momentum and would be overwhelmed. In other words, they're admitting in April of last year that Ukraine is losing the war. So they advocated instead for increased asymmetric warfare inside Russia, i.e. terror attacks, to get an upper hand in negotiations to end the war. Oh, and also the Kursk incursion, which was to try to capture the Kursk nuclear plant. Didn't work. Now they've been stuck in that black hole ever since because they couldn't admit it didn't work. And thousands of soldiers have died there, but whatever. The result of the engagement was that the chief of military intelligence, Kirill Budanov, was muzzled by Team Zelensky in a series of media attacks, pro-government websites. His key deputies were fired without his consent, weakening his agency. So in other words, in April, when what was Congress doing? Mike Johnson authorizing another $60 billion for Ukraine. Ukraine's telling us we're losing the war. So, meanwhile, we've got our guys in Ukraine keeping the war going. And now Ukraine is in an existential crisis. The war is not going well. Biden is leaving office. Trump has expressed multiple times he wants to get us out of the war. And they are at their point where if we end the war, they may die, literally. That is what the stakes are to them. So here is what what our pal Scott Ritter says about this. It's kind of a longish clip. I did speed it up, so it's going to go a little bit quicker. But this is important, I think. This is is this the right clip? Hold on. Let me see if I got this here. I think I'll make this work. Hold on. This is important. This is he's talking about sleeper cells and what our military is capable of. And let me remind you, folks, because if you think this is far-fetched, that Ukraine's capable of doing this, the Republican mainstream has been saying for the past 2 years or more that we should be extremely concerned and alarmed that our border is open because of the potential threat of Islamic terrorism. Right? We've been saying that we should be worried about Iranians carrying out terrorist acts in the United States because our border is wide open. Well, if we think the Iranians can do this, wouldn't we think the Ukrainians, who are trained by our own military, wouldn't be able to do these kind of things? So he's talking about these sleeper cells trained by special forces. And here's what he says. Here we go.
A lot of what you see happening inside Russia, Airborne Regiment, its community, he did some weird stuff. But the point is, today, this isn't done haphazardly. You pick an area and you will build these systems in place, and you keep them there as sleeper cells, as sleeper capabilities. And we train the Ukrainians to do that. And the Ukrainians are doing that. They're doing it throughout Russia. And they're not just in Moscow and in St. Petersburg. They're in Novosibirsk. They're in Khabarovsk. They're in Vladivostok. They're everywhere. That's how good they are. They're taking advantage of Russia's lax immigrant policy and the fact that you have communities that fall outside of the framework of normal Russian society, where you can do things that escape the attention of local law enforcement. The Ukrainians are involved in Africa, hunting down and killing Russians in Africa. They're involved not just in Mali, but they're also down in Sudan. They're actively going after the Russians in that. So you have this capability that's a advanced blend of direct action, unconventional warfare, trained by the United States. And what Zelensky said is, we may turn this against you. And it's the ultimate blowback. And I agree. I mean, look, if I were, they'll never do it, but President Trump, if you did bring me in and made me the head of special warfare for a day, I'd get the list of everybody we trained, and I'd say we have to kill them all. These are bad people, and they have to be done away with. They're not our friends. They're our enemies. We can't trust them anymore with the training we've given them. They must be eliminated with extreme prejudice. Boom. Because Zelensky's 100% correct. These people are trained to go off the radar. If they're as smart as I think they are, and I will never be disrespectful of the intelligence of the Ukrainians, they've proven themselves far too resilient to be denigrated in that way. They will have already prepared for this. They will have prepared. They've got a huge, again, Ellenville, New York. There's a Stepan Bandera child training camp where they take the next generation of Banderas and train them right here in Ellenville, New York. Mm-hmm. They have a diaspora in Canada and in the United States. The diaspora is CIA. Again, the CIA created this diaspora. The whole purpose of this diaspora was to help sustain the ideology and then transfer it back to Ukraine, both during Soviet times and in post-Soviet times. It's a CIA front operation all along. If I were the Ukrainians, I'd be building safe houses. I'd be stocking them with weapons. It ain't hard to get weapons here in America, you know. And I'd have vehicles. I'd have false IDs. I'd have it all pre-positioned so that when it all goes away, I take my training. I become somebody new. I appear in this community as Uncle Joe, and I drive my school bus or I drive my whatever. And when the time comes, I go down and I kill the president of the United States out of an act of revenge. That's how it works. And the Ukrainians are very capable. It's not something that should be treated lightly. These are very bad people. And I'm not, these are people who believe in the ideology of Stepan Bandera, which sort of is automatically disqualifying in my book. But they've received some very, very advanced training, and they've used it in real life situations. It's not as though it's somebody like me who received a lot of really cool training in my life, but didn't get to use about 90% of it. Probably, thankfully, I'm still here. I'm the kind of guy that was, I'd fuck it up somehow and end up getting killed. But but these guys have been using it in real life situations against a world-class opponent, the Russians, who are no slouches. And I think they're some of the most dangerous people out there. And in the interest of the United States, we should terminate them all. Literally terminate them all.
Well, that gets us to.
And that's in that clip. So there you go. Now, I don't know. I can't prove any of this. I can't prove that Ukraine is behind any of this stuff. But I can say that the FBI story for these two congruent terror attacks makes zero sense whatsoever. And when the story makes no sense, it's not true. And that leads to the next question, which is, okay, well, if that's not true, then who benefits from this? What's the policy goal? What's the operational goal of anything that, if this was carried out by some state entity or even some organizational entity, what was the purpose of it? From the perspective of the average American, it just seems like, a senseless crime of, just wanton destruction. But in the context of it being the first year of 2025, the year of the return of President Trump, the obvious motive, and maybe it's not Ukraine, maybe it's someone else. But the message is to be sent is that there is dangerous people out there and that America is not safe from them.
That Ritter guy sounded incredibly credible. I mean, I don't know where you got all that information, but he sounded like somebody I would believe him.
Scott
Not
Ritter,
like
he was a Marine Corps intelligence officer who became literally the first weapons inspector, whose job it was to supervise the dismantling of nuclear weapons in Soviet Russia. And then later on was the one supervising the mission to ensure that Iraq had destroyed its cache of weapons of mass destruction. He was very famous in the early 2000s for testifying that Saddam had in fact destroyed his weapons of mass destruction. And he knew because he had actually made sure they did it. And in many cases he was involved in a lot of intelligence operations. He is a career military man with a lot of experience in this kind of field. And he was on my show. It's a few years ago. Amazing guy. But he does know what he's talking about. In fact, I cut the clip down a lot because he prefaced that whole story with a whole long story about this other deep cover Marine guy he knew personally. These things are out there. But then on the other hand, you have what might have really happened. But whenever you've got a conspiracy, you've also got the turd in the punch bowl story, I suppose you could say, the thing to get people going down the wrong rabbit hole. So whether it was like in 2020 when the real story was absentee ballot fraud, and the wrong rabbit hole was the gnomes of Zurich who were manipulating the vote machines and hacking in from China and Iran and everything else. The Flynn Network seems to have their own narrative already set to go on this, and it's got nothing to do with anything that we were just talking about. No, it's the radical Islamic jihadis, and who knows what else they're saying.
That's one piece of it.
But
it's also, they're tying it in with the drones and saying that the drones were had some sort of an anti-gravity technology.
Oh boy,
it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, always go right to the kookery.
Right, and that they were deployed. So, they claim to have So Sean Ryan, he had this guy named Sam Shoemate on his show on.
This is going all over the internet. Yep.
And it went. Everybody saw it, and probably most of the people watching this saw it because of the Flynn Network. And there was this huge coordinated push that everybody's got to see this. This is huge. And I had, I don't know, 8 people, maybe more, send it to me right away. I watched the thing and I'm like, what? This is everything about it was ridiculous. So Sam Shoemate, he was the only source behind. He works with Doc Chambers, who's very close to Flynn, and he was the only source of this story in September that 9 heat-seeking missiles had come across the border at a checkpoint. So, I mean, that right there is just so completely absurd that somebody could just drive at the back of their semi-truck 9 heat-seeking missiles and bring them in. And so Basil Baz and Doc Chambers went on this Flynn Network show and said that this was going to target, these missiles were coming across the border in order to target Trump Force One. And the only people that were talking about it were the Flynn Network and Dan Bongino. And no other media touched it because you couldn't confirm. There's no way to validate it. The source was Sam Shoemate. And and this is somebody that doesn't like Sam Shoemate. The guy's a Democrat, but that doesn't necessarily discredit him just in and of itself. There were several people that have different tech that validates whether an email, a screenshot of an email is actually an email.
So you sent me this. There was this is the screenshot that they have here where this guy posts. This is from hold on. This is posted by Sean Ryan.
Mhm.
The real email sent to Sam Shoemate, I guess that is.
Mhm.
And people notice, for example, like in this, and I can't blow up the image unfortunately, but if you look closely here at the bottom, there's like a space after the less than sign, the sort of bracket you put around the email address. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And a spell check thing that you don't normally see in emails.
Yep. Yeah, you only see it when you compose them, and it just or in a Word document.
Yeah.
And in the email he says, this is the proof that it's true, is that my first car was a 2007 Mustang, but it was actually a 1998 Mustang was his actual first car. So according to public records. So
and when I was little, like 16, all my friends like to drive, like they're all into Mustangs. A 98 Mustang looks nothing like a 2007 Mustang. Or maybe I'm thinking maybe they're driving older ones. I don't know.
Yeah. But are you able
10 years is a lot.
Are you able to pull up this video that I uploaded?
Yeah. Let me put it on right
What
now.
I basically want to say is,
because we could describe this as the punchline of this show. So there is this hour-long interview that people can watch between these two guys who sound a lot like, they remind me of Andrew Huff, kind of. These are your intel bros.
Yeah,
and
they both have military intelligence backgrounds.
Yeah, and here's how they always the most reliable people in military intelligence. But but again, contrast like with Scott Ritter, how Scott Ritter sounds versus how these guys sound. Very different. Maybe it's an age difference. I don't know, but here we go. Here's what they say.
so what I basically want to say,
Before this is the punchline. This is a different point. But if you guys haven't seen it, well, go to Scott. Go to Scott's X account, bigger truth. You'll be able to find the full interview at some place there. And anyway, so this is the punchline. This is the whole thing.
Sean Ryan. You'll see. It'll be the first thing that comes up if you look up Sean Ryan. So
okay, here we go.
so what I basically want to say is, it's going to be a bloody 2025. I think that's very obvious. And so for those of you that are looking for something to do, and if finally come to the realization that our government is failing us, here's what you need to do. You need to get with your local communities. You need to, especially schools. Schools are very vulnerable, no matter how many active shooters we have in the schools. The infrastructure that's been put in, which is minimal to none, a lot of schools still have none. You better start holding your schools accountable, and you better start raising hell and having them upgrade security no matter what the cost, because no matter what the cost is, it's not gonna amount to the loss of life that we will potentially see throughout the United States.
Oh yeah, that's good advice, guys. Just browbeat your schools about their lack of security. That won't raise any flags with anybody. It'll get a lot accomplished.
Right. And this is completely aligned with Flynn Network narratives. That's why I put that in big bold letters at the bottom of the screen, because that is exactly what this is. Flynn himself has been talking about, and on December 20th, he says we have 30 days until Armageddon. He says there's going to be a massive wave of terrorist attacks on our soil, and they're going to do everything they can to end the world, and it's going to be a bloody year, and you got to get involved locally. That's the answer, because he keeps talking about local election national impact, which is another show just talking about.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's terror attacks, but the only purpose of them will be to discredit and destroy the Trump administration. Like that's the political purpose of it. So why'd you play into that? The thing to do is to, be civically engaged and, try to help the Trump administration, be smart about things.
I would say that anyone who is telling you to be angry or fearful or hopeless, that's a psyop. And, there is, I think that there's so much reason to actually be optimistic, but you can't find any of that in any of the media on the right or the left. And so you got to remind yourself that there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And we have Trump endorsed Mike Johnson, and he's been working closely with Mike Johnson. They just met yesterday. They spent all day offsite at some camp at a military base. The Republicans did in the House, coming up with their plan for this year to help support Trump to accomplish his agenda, which includes fixing the FBI, fixing the Department of Justice. The things that we've talked about even here on the show, getting rid of the Department of Education, fixing the situation with our schools and DEI, and there's such a huge list of priorities, and fixing our border, sealing the border, and getting rid of all the criminals, and and dealing with Democrat states, counties, and cities that want criminals to walk free without bail. I mean, it's such a huge list, and you guys know this better than I do, even.
Speaking of that, just a quick thing for our audience. So tomorrow is the last day that Gretchen Whitmer can sign the last of the bills. So after tomorrow, we will finalize Operation Watchdog for the past 2 years. We will have finally be able to look back and see what exactly is now the law of the land, and what has been defeated, and we'll take it from there, and we'll talk about maybe changes and improvements to that whole project. So folks, if you go to rescuemichigan.com, go to Operation Watchdog, if there's features, things you'd like to work better, please let me know. Please reach out. And anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Oh, that's all good. I think we've got to fight to stay positive, and that's why I say I've got this Dream Big Again sign. I got that at Trump's very last his last rally in Grand Rapids. They were handing those out, and I said, that's just in the face of all of the other narratives that we're bombarded with, the challenge to be optimistic is it just sticks out, and it's like the antidote to all of this. And so I just want to encourage everyone to just be optimistic, tune out all of the doomsayers, and because all of that is meant to destabilize this country.
Yeah, stay positive, guys, or Elon Musk will fuck you in the face and silence you on Twitter. Yeah, we'll see. Elon. Yeah, we'll talk more about Elon one of these days. He's done some funny, curious things lately, but we'll see what happens once the new president is sworn in and Congress is rolling. We'll see what happens. So until then, I think we should probably call it a stream. Scott, Barry, you guys have any events, anything you want to promote before we sign off for the night?
I had a kind of a question, like how are you guys looking? We're all looking at the state chair race, and we had a little bit of evolution took place over the weekend here. I don't know if you guys followed the running
I might have
mates.
missed the story. What happened?
Well, Runestad has selected himself a running mate.
Yeah.
And word on the street is it's a Karamos operative.
Yeah,
so I know what's her name. I met her a few times, Bernadette. I mean, she seemed like a wonderful woman. I couldn't say anything bad about her if I wanted to, but I'm not gonna lie, that kind of freaked me out, man. I was like, man, are we really about to pull up another one of those,
Yeah, I certainly, before he announced his running mate, was I would say Runstad was my preference, but I don't understand, and at some point I'll try to reach out to Senator Runstad and ask him what his thinking might have been, because for those who don't know, the big story with Bernadette Smith was that after she lost the race for Republican National Committee woman at the last convention, she disputed the results and claimed the election was rigged and the rules were unfair, and dragged it out for a very long time and really wasted a lot of everyone's time and embarrassed herself. And so
And then she became the director of the America Project, working directly for Flynn and Byrne.
Yeah, so that's certainly problematic, and I don't know. I don't know what. Well, like I said, I don't want to come without at least finding out, because I should at least talk to Senator Runstead and ask him what his thinking was about that before I comment. But to me, it was a bad decision. So, but maybe it's something I don't know. Jay says, am I supporting Greenlee? Probably not, but we'll see. Possibly, depending on how this thing goes with Bernadette Smith. Chris Gersey says Smith will reignite the Karamo cult. Maybe not. Mike Hume says, is Greenlee running? Because I'll support him. He is. There's at least 4 candidates running as of now: Scott Greenlee, Jim Runstead, Michonne Maddock, and I want to say Joe Sem, something like that. We'll do a show just about that at some point one of these days, probably pretty soon. Mike, we'll do a stream about this. We'll talk about it at some point, but not tonight. We've already gone for a pretty long time, and I think we're pretty exhausted on topics for the time being, but we will talk about this because it is timely for sure. So, all right. Anything else, guys?
No, I just got my shows Mondays and Wednesdays, my Substack's biggertruthmedia.com. And thank you for having us on.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, everyone, you should subscribe to Scott or to Scott's show and his Substack, and very good to have you on as always. I always welcome back.
Man, thank you.
All right. That will do it for us for this week. Where there may be a stream tomorrow, but probably there won't be. No promises, but maybe keep your YouTube on or something, and there might be some. So if you whenever they start the certification ceremony, maybe just check and see if I'm live. But don't hold your breath, guys. But maybe there'll be something during the week. It might be a busy week. We'll see. All right, guys, that will do it for us for tonight. As always, thanks for all you do for liberty, and until next time, peace.